Um, the Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth was born out of the failure of the Copenhagen Environmental Summit, the climate summit. And Evo Morales, the president of Bolivia, said this has become a summit of the rights of polluters. We were supposed to gather to defend the rights of the earth. And the way this particular declaration is different is because it puts the earth at the center. All other environmental treaties, whether it be the climate treaty, the biodiversity treaty, are still very, very human-centered, and I would say still very, very much corporate-centered, capital-centered, greed-driven. They are written in order to be able to protect the planet, but it ends up they defend profits rather than the planet. Yeah. Corporations have been given legal personality as if they were human beings. And in fact, they have higher rights than human beings. Worse, they have much higher rights than all other species. How do the rights of Mother Earth protect the rights of other species? Not because suddenly trees will start speaking in courts or earthworms will have standing in the courts. It's we as humans who have to have the awareness of their rights and function with that awareness. We have to be the protectors acting on their behalf, not in a representative way, but with a deep, deep awareness that everything is interconnected, and it's our actions and our thinking that is the platform for the protection of the rights of other species within the human framework of legal systems. Um, if you have the rights of Mother Earth in your thinking and your consciousness, you realize that all other beings have rights, including all human beings. So a deeply earth-centered philosophy cannot become imperialistic. It cannot become dictatorial. A narrow-minded environmental philosophy could lead to what I have called eco-imperialism, the dictatorship of the rich over the poor, of the powerful over the weak, and blaming large numbers of poor people for what are really externalities of a greed-driven, high-consumption, high-resource exploitation system. So I don't think we have to worry that earth rights can create an eco-imperialism. Um, the patenting of life is a problem for many reasons. The first is the fact that a patent is given for something you have invented, something you've created. Life is not created, it's not an invention. And therefore, the claim to a patent is wrong to begin with. But normally, most things related to life are known by indigenous people. We know what medicinal plants we've used in India in Ayurveda. The farmers know what seeds they have evolved. So when a patent is taken on a life form, it is normally also a patent and a claim on the knowledge that is embodied in that life form and relates to it. And this leads to what I have called biopiracy, the theft of intellectual and biodiversity heritage. We have had to fight cases like the case of the patenting of neem, the case of the patenting of basmati, the case of the patenting of a wheat variety, and more recently the case of a patenting of an Indian melon by Monsanto. The third reason why patents on life forms are wrong is because life is the basis of life. And when a seed is owned by one company, Monsanto, they extract super royalties from poor peasants. We've seen what this has done. In India, when Monsanto entered the seed sector in cotton, we have farmers paying such high prices for the seed, 8,000% increase, that the farmers are then getting into debt, and indebted farmers are ending their lives. 250,000 Indian farmers have committed suicide because of debt. This is also a result of monopolies through intellectual property and patents. The very idea of a corporation being a human being, in my view, is deeply flawed. These are associations with contractual obligations, and they should be treated as derived entities, not as people. They are constructs, and they should be treated as constructs. They become psychopaths because once you give them the rights of a human being and give them a legal personality, and then you've given them the single mandate of having only one objective, making profits at any cost, then they will brutalize people, they will destroy ecosystems, they will wipe out species, and that is highly psychopathic behavior. No human being would continue to be able to do harm without taking feedback. Psychopaths are able to block off the consequences of their actions. How can we correct this from happening? By putting corporations in their rightful place as entities that we create to perform certain functions, and if they go beyond their bound, to withdraw their charter. This happens in every other field of life, but yet in our times of corporate rule, corporations have been made higher than law, higher than constitutions, higher than humanity, higher than the earth, and that is a disease. That's what's killing the planet. They are very, very good, ethical, sustainable companies and businesses. The word corporation already suggests that you've become a mega entity, you've become divorced from your human ground, and you've become divorced from ethical basis. Companies like the Body Shop were highly ethical. My dear late friend Anita Roddick and Gordon Roddick started it. Navdanya, the movement I've started, we are not a business as business, we are a social business. We do everything right for the earth and people. And the organic movement is full of people trying to make sure they do no harm, neither to other species nor to human beings. And I think we can do business in ethical ways and sustainable ways. It's only when we think the only objective is profit and nothing else matters that things start to go wrong. Most civilizations have recognized that the earth as a whole has life, has integrity, has capacity to create the conditions for its own life. And that is why the Andean community is called her Pachamama. In India, we've called her Vasundhara, Bhumi, Prithvi. And in contemporary times, the idea of Gaia has come out of science. Even though the name comes out of Greek mythology, it's a highly scientific studied recognition by a scientist like James Lovelock that the earth organizes the capacity for her own renewal. She regulates her temperatures, she regulates the interaction between species, she regulates the climate if we don't mess it up. And I do think it is time to recognize this self-organizing, self-renewing capacity of the earth, which is why we talk about the living earth, which is why we talk about the rights of Mother Earth. I think the quantum theory should be a very big break with the old Cartesian mechanical thought that assumed everything is separate, nothing is related unless you come with a big bang, and action at a distance is impossible. Quantum theory tells you that everything is related. You cannot separate. Everything is related. And in fact, my PhD in quantum theory was on non-separability and non-locality in quantum theory. This is exactly the lesson of Gaia, that everything is related, everything is connected. So all the real deep, new, emerging sciences are confirming what we have known through centuries, that the earth is living and everything is connected. It's only a short period where we fooled ourselves into believing in a mechanistic reductionist paradigm, and its days are over, and we should not let it be the dominant mode of thinking anymore. Climate skepticism definitely comes out of the assumption that we are separate from nature, that our actions don't make a difference to the way the earth functions, but it is also partly shaped by intention to deny the evidence that has accumulated, so that there's possibilities to keep our addiction on fossil fuels extend a little longer. And sometimes it is created by the fact that climate instability is about all kinds of erratic behavior of the climate, whereas the term global warming that was originally used for climate change gives the suggestion that if things aren't warming, then it's fine, there's no climate change happening. Apartheid means separation. And when we think we are separate from nature and not part of nature, we are living in a condition that I have called eco-apartheid. Humans are a part of nature in the sense that everything you do has an impact on other beings, on the web of life. But that does not mean that we act in the perfection of a harmony when we start taking actions that are destructive actions. After all, we also have choice, we also have a free will, we have agency, and that gives us the possibility of both staying in harmony with the balance that the earth requires and falling out of harmony too. That's a choice we make as humans. I think human irresponsibility and human destructiveness cannot be accounted for as part of Gaia's plan. I think we need to correct our actions. And that means saving ourselves in terms of our humanity, our ability to survive on the earth in that very narrow niche of 10,000 years that has allowed humanity to evolve on this planet. There's a very small element of temperature, very tiny ecological condition in which the human species can survive. We are destroying the condition for life for ourselves, but also for other species, but we are incapable of destroying the earth as a whole. She's too big, she's too powerful, and she'll go on at a higher temperature, she'll go on with different sets of species. The earth won't be saved by us, but we need to save ourselves in order to be more responsible to the earth. Permaculture means literally permanent agriculture. That's how agriculture has been till industrial agriculture came on the horizon. Industrial agriculture came on the horizon because after the war, there was surplus of war chemicals which were then deployed as fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. Every lasting system of agriculture is a permanent agriculture, and it must have an integration between permanent crops, the perennials, the trees, animals and livestock, and annual crops. And it's that integration that can make agriculture as sustainable as nature herself. This is what Sir Albert Howard has said in his Agricultural Testament, that in the ancient farming systems of India, farms were as permanent as a prairie or as the ocean. The age of fossil fuels created a highly artificial sense of having more. But it is actually at the root of creating new scarcities. If in this period we have put so much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that our climate itself is unstable, we've got a new kind of scarcity. For every person working on an industrial farm, there are 300 invisible energy slaves, which are driven by fossil fuels. So we've actually increased our planet footprint, we have increased our pressure, and we have decreased the availability of resources as a result of using up more of the planet's resources. A permanent agriculture, a sustainable agriculture, and ecological agriculture is the only way we can manage to provide our needs. In Navdanya, we've evolved an indicator called health per acre, which shows that the more biodiversity intensive your farming is, the more nutrition per acre you get. So if you are too many people and too little land, you'd better maximize output of food per hectare rather than input of fossil fuels per hectare. Now, is this something governments should be doing? Of course they should be doing it, because they have a duty to feed their people, they have a duty to ensure food security, and they have a duty to not destroy the stability of our ecosystems and our environment. Why are they failing? Because there are huge influences from the profit-driven industry, whether it be the fossil fuel industry or the agribusiness industry making huge money from chemicals. And that's the block. The science is very clear. A transition to less fossil fuel use, higher food output is totally possible. And this is the argument I've tried to make in my book, Soil Not Oil. I think when you have a holistic view, there is no inner and no outer. It's one continuum. And in the continuum, of course, there is stuff beyond the stuff. The deeper organizing systems, the deeper energy levels, whether they be energy levels of the material world, the food we eat, or us as human beings. And the idea of the world just being inhabited by dead matter is the legacy of the industrial age. Neither is matter dead, nor is it only matter. And we need to wake up to that. We need to awaken ourselves to the deeper dimensions of life, the deeper energy levels of life, including a deeper spirituality. And if we don't do that, we will never be able to reorient our ends, our objects of being on this planet. Consumerism has become the new obsession, and it's become a new obsession because those who want to sell cheap, non-renewable, obsolete stuff all the time make good money through consumerism. We have just become pawns in that game of greed and in that game of profit. Consumerism has reduced our fullness of sense of who we are. It has reduced our well-being. And to increase our well-being, we definitely need to move beyond consumerism. And that's why I'm so happy to be working with the government of Bhutan, which decided they weren't going to measure gross national product and gross domestic product, which only measures how many things are being bought and sold. So the more consumerism there is, the more growth there is. And they said, no, we'll measure gross national happiness, because that's what really matters. So well-being is what we should be looking towards. Well-being is what we should be measuring. In my view, making peace with the earth and making peace amongst ourselves is part of the same path. Most of the wars across the planet are being fought over resources. There are oil wars, there are mineral wars, there are forest wars, there are biodiversity wars, there are water wars. And not only does making peace with the planet get rid of these wars, it also gets rid of the sense of us competing with each other, because we realize we are part of one earth community, we are part of one web of life in which cooperation rather than competition is what matters. Wars come out of competition. We should be cooperating. Technology is a tool. A tool can't save the tool user. The tool user has to save themselves and reshape tools. Now, at every point of history, people have assumed that whatever new source of energy they found, because it wasn't part of the commercial exploitation, it was free. Coal was considered free at the beginning of the fossil fuel industrial age. if the entire world starts to reorganize itself around the energy that pervades through this universe, we're going to A, have a buildup of entropy, and B, a maintenance of high consumption. And for every instrument, every machine we run, every car we drive, the input might be some coming free, but the output is going to be of very high cost. The ecological footprint will not reduce, and that is why it's very, very important to have an energy descent. Emissions from fossil fuel are definitely the reason for the buildup of greenhouse gases. We are burning up fossil fuels, which are hundreds and hundreds of years of biomass fossilized every day. And that means the carbon dioxide that's being emitted is way beyond the levels which the biosphere can absorb in its recycling capacity. And that is actually the crisis of the climate. The crisis of the climate should be viewed in terms of a pollution crisis in which we are putting too much air pollution into the atmosphere, which is then destabilizing the climate patterns. As I've written in my book, Soil Not Oil, carbon trading and emissions trading has actually increased pollution. The entire Kyoto Protocol was supposed to reduce emissions by 5%, but in the Kyoto Protocol period, emissions have gone up 17% because emissions trading means let the polluter make money out of trading in pollution, and that cannot reduce pollution. As far as carbon tax is concerned, it could work as long as you create incentives for renewables. If all you have is taxation of the non-renewable without building up a renewable energy system, then energy will be accessible to the rich and the poor will be deprived, and we need universal access of clean energy. I have in writing, in words, in speeches, and now in a core group that Occupy Wall Street has created, totally supported the Occupy movement because it's a movement whose time has come. It's an important movement because first they have defined that we are living in a world where inequality has become so obscene, where 1% are living at the cost of 99%, and no society can be socially and politically and economically sustainable with that kind of polarization. But they're also pointing out to the non-sustainability of our practices in terms of our relationship with nature. And I think we need to occupy and reoccupy every space in order to put things on the path of justice and sustainability. We need to reoccupy our water systems, our food systems, our democracy systems. Otherwise, there is no future for humanity. I take a lot of inspiration from Gandhi, who showed that protest by itself is not enough. You've got to be the change you want to see, which means you have to practice the alternative you prefer. And in addition, the highest recipe he gave us, he said, and you have to stop cooperating. You can't have a protest and yet do everything that you're protesting against. And the word he gave for this was satyagraha, the fight for truth. I don't think things are exactly as they are. I think if we hadn't started to save seeds, no seed would be available. Monsanto would own the last seed. And today, Monsanto is on the defensive. The seed-saving movements are growing. Organic movements are growing. Ecology movements are growing. And yes, there hasn't been an instant solution, but these problems are deep. And it would be wrong to imagine instantaneous solution. But when you think of the large numbers of people who are making a shift, I believe that the choices are being made in favor of a future for the earth and a future for the human species. Yes, we need a jubilee for the earth because not only is the debt excessive, it's taking lives. I work in the regions of India, in Vidarbha, where the debt because of high-cost patented seed has pushed farmers to suicide. India has lost 250,000 farmers in just a little over 15 years. They need a jubilee. So do the microorganisms which are being killed by the Bt toxins. So do the bees and the butterflies that are being killed by that Bt toxin. A debt creating mechanism is a mechanism for economic growth, but it is a mechanism for genocide and ecocide. And that's why it's very important to say no more debt repayment. We call a jubilee and let's start again. After the Jubilee, a new economic model would first of all be based on living economies, not killing economies. At this point, we are very efficient at destroying the earth and destroying people's lives. We need to build life. Secondly, growth would definitely not be an indicator because all that growth measures is how quickly you can destroy. Thirdly, the indicators would focus on the well-being and health of the planet and people. It's been done in many, many areas by many communities. It's just the mainstream that needs to realize that their model has run out of steam. Gandhi was asked why he rode trains when he was so critical of the British and the infrastructure, like the railways that the British had created. And he said, if it takes me a train journey across the length and breadth of India to make India free and get rid of the British, I will ride the trains for the short run so that we don't have to have trains in a decentralized economy in the long run. And I think it's the same issue today in terms of riding a car and riding an aeroplane. I get onto planes, not because I love it, I think they're a prison. I get onto planes because there's a larger world issue that we need to connect around, we need to have solidarity around. But I don't dream of the most beautiful world as a world of zipping around in planes. My most beautiful world is a world on an organic farm with a garden. When you think about the Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth or the concept and practice of earth democracy that we are building in India, these are all contributions towards building an earth community, thinking of a united natures, a united nations of all species, not just of all people of the world, which has actually been reduced to all governments of the world, and within all governments, the more powerful governments of the world who can veto any decision anywhere. We need a new democracy, and that democracy must include the democracy of all life on this planet.